Okay, great. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have you guys. Today we are presenting a COVID-19 impact on the wedding industry in 2021 and beyond, presented by our very own Shane McMurray. So just a little bit before we get started, first, this webinar is being recorded. There will be a link of the recording that will be emailed to you after the event is over. If you do have any questions at all during the presentation, please just type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel, and I'll try and address them during the presentation as we go along. So next slide, I think.
Yeah, Laura's driving.
Great. Great. So I am Laura Cody. I am the User Experience Director at Zenweds. Zenweds is an online marketplace that simplifies how engaged couples can discover and compare and book the perfect vendors for their wedding. We've built this intelligent platform that pairs pre-qualified couples with vendors based on availability, location, budget, and unique wedding needs. So since most of our attendees are wedding professionals, we'll try and be highlighting the key benefits to vendors on this right side. So more quality leads are what you're going to get in Zenweds, as our platform is aimed at educating couples on budget for your services based on local market data. We are also striving for less ghosting. So hopefully we'll let you know when couples are actually no longer interested in your services or when they've decided to move on to a different vendor, so that you can actually spend more time with the couples who you know are available and a good fit. There will be no more price shopping brides, since you only get matched with couples with the budget that fit your packages, and we have a lot of price transparency that we're striving for in the platform. And you should be able to spend less time trying to qualify your couples. We are trying to do that for you guys. So finding out if the couples are right for you, we're going to present you with the right couples. So once you get access to the wedding profile of couples, you'll see all of the information that you need right there. So today, our presenter is Shane McMurray. Shane is the founder and CEO of The Wedding Report, the leading source of unbiased wedding statistics. The Wedding Report is a research company that collects and forecasts wedding statistics for the wedding industry. So now, without further ado, let's turn it over to Shane.
Hey guys. Yeah, so some of you, I know some of the names on here that you've seen me before. And we've talked, emailed or over the phone or whatever. So thanks for coming out. Wanted to share some data around what's happening in the market and kind of give you some ideas of where I think things might go in the future. Just for those of you that don't know me, I've been doing collecting data since basically 2004. I've been working in this space, in the wedding space, specifically in data collection and trying to understand the market. I don't work in the industry. I'm not a planner, photographer, DJ. Early in 2000, I started a paper company and we made wedding invitations, and that kind of just folded into this data company thing, which I haven't done invitation stuff in probably 18 years. So I don't work in industry. So I'm looking outside. I'm looking from the outside into the industry to figure out what's going on and trying to give you guys some idea of from a different perspective, an unbiased perspective, a non-media take on it. And also too, I just want to say thanks to the Zenwed team for doing this. I've known these guys for a while, and really great people. So thanks for putting all this together and let's doing this particular webinar. Kind of cool. So go ahead.
Glad to have you.
Thanks. So a couple of things a couple of things about the data that I'm going to share with you. So early when COVID started, I knew that we were probably going to get hit pretty bad, or the industry was going to get hit pretty bad. I mean, it is an event industry. We meet with people in large gatherings all the time. And so that was going to be hit pretty bad. So I started reaching out to couples right away, trying to collect some information about what they were going to do, reaching out to vendors in the space, trying to understand what was happening with them. So all of this data that I'm going to present to you is some of the work I did early on. So March, April, May, June was all of the time that I collected to try to come up with what I thought the market was going to do going forward. So I have some ideas on where I think things might change a little bit, and I'll share that with you later. But this is at the time of March, April, May, June. This is the data that came out of that, which I based all of my forecast on. So basically, we did about, I think it was, I don't know, I want to say a couple thousand couples that participated in collecting this data, and there was at least maybe, I want to say, 1,000 different vendors that we collected data from, all across the country, by the way. So everybody from people that get married at the Justice of the Peace, and to people that have huge weddings, to vendors that service all kinds of things. So amateurs, everything. Anyways, so what we found is that, and you probably have already experienced a lot of this, there was a lot of postponement. There was some cancellation that took place throughout the year. There was a lot of people that ended up moving their weddings into 2021. And I think you'll probably see people moving it further out into 2022 as we try to figure out and navigate how things are going to happen in 2021 with COVID, because it's getting worse. And then also dates. So the important thing is, I think for many couples, is the date. The date is important to them in most respects. So if that date wasn't available for their favorite vendor or even someone else, they may have pushed it all the way out to 2022. I also know that a lot of couples probably just had a quick have someone marry them because they wanted to start their life together, and then they'll probably have an event later on, or they may not have an event later on. So there's a lot of changes happening, I think, in the industry in general. There was already some shifts towards certain things, but I think that you'll probably see those just basically accelerate themselves, as we probably already have seen. There was a significant amount of people that were trying to hold their date. Like I said, many of them could have been holding the date because they were literally just saying, hey, look, let's just get married and let's go in. And then from a budget perspective, about 46% of couples said that they were going to cut their budget, which is normal, right? Like, so guest counts went way down because you couldn't have large you couldn't have large meetings with a lot of people in most states. And I think there's still some restrictions out there that are preventing that from happening as well. So the interesting thing, I think, was that about 58% of vendors expected that they were going to have more losses in 2020 at the time that we were collecting this data. So that was pretty interesting. I'm planning to do some follow-up work with vendors probably this month. And then I'll try to get that data out to you guys by December, so we can try and figure out what's happening going forward. But yeah, interesting times. Go ahead. Next slide. So from a perspective of gains and losses, the thought is that we probably lost about 45 to 50% of weddings in this year. So about 1 million weddings. One of the things I was polling, looking, because I know the clerk in Nevada, I know how to get, Hawaii and New Hampshire actually provide data pretty quickly around how many people are getting married. Hawaii is down right now. They're probably down about 55 to 60% of their normal wedding space. At the time that I took this, Nevada was down like 60%, and then New Hampshire was pretty stable, but it was down probably 20 or 30%. Since looking, Nevada has taken their stats offline, so they don't have anything out there right now. So I'll have to go back to the clerk and ask her. But looking at Hawaii, I just looked at them this past weekend, and they typically have about 16,000 to 17,000 weddings in a year. They're only at currently 7,500 through September. That's what they normally have, is like 16 or 17,000 through September. They're significantly down. And then New Hampshire was probably only down about 10 or 15%, which is great. That means that people are still getting married, but they're probably not having the type of events you would expect. So the thought is that there's going to be this gain of, since there's this loss this year, there's going to be this gain or surge next year of about 25 to 30% of what we lost this year. And then I think that'll carry on into 2022, but it really depends, I guess, on how the first part of the year plays out. If we get a vaccine and everyone gets it, I think they're thinking by, maybe end of first quarter, mid second quarter, then it's possible that we could kind of get back to more normal business, but it's probably going to be impacted at the beginning of the year. So we'll have to see how that's going. I think that 25%, 30% gain might be more in the 10 to 20% range, depending on how it settles out. And then you'll probably see that continue surge through 2022, maybe even the 2023 timeframe. Spending is going to be down for sure. People are going to have less people. Their priorities are shifted. They're after experiences and smaller events versus larger events. So that's going to be down significantly. This year, it's also going to be down next year from where we typically are. And over the 2 years, I pretty much estimated we're going to lose about $25 billion in general, just over the 2-year period between 2020 and 2022, or 2021, and it may carry into 2022. So next slide. So this is the drop and surge chart. Basically, is what it's showing you. This is basically weddings over time since 2008, and then our forecast out to 2024. This year, there's not that many weddings, right? I mean, it's just not happening. And then next year we expected the surge, but this will probably change. This is just a forecast literally based on the data we collected earlier on in the year. So this will probably change a little bit depending on how things pan out in the first quarter or so next year. Next slide. And the same thing with spending. This is spending over time, 2008 out to 2024 forecast. The estimate for this year is about just right at 20K, and then through 2021 out into 2023, 2021 out to 2024 before we probably get back to where we were generally in 2018, 2019. So next slide. So this is a map of states where weddings declined. Basically the hardest hit states are in the darker orange color. Some of this data is also based on the pulse survey that was done by the census, looking at how businesses were impacted, and then also how consumers were impacted, or individuals at the state level. This is for even though we got some survey data nationally, it's really important to understand how things are impacted locally. And so based on that pulse survey, we're basically able to get down to the local level and figure out some of the impacts at the state level and spending and that sort of thing. So for example, you can see like Michigan, New York, unfortunately, like Maine, Massachusetts, like New England area was pretty hard hit from number of weddings based on business impact. And then least hit was like Midwest, and then then out west, so a little bit.
Shane, do you think that we should expect a recovery similar to the drop in 2008, or will the effects of COVID-19 last longer? What do you think?
I think it'll probably last a little bit longer, and we probably are hit pretty hard because if you look at what happened in 2008, it was more of it wasn't an event industry impact. It was more of just an economics impact in general. So the housing market exploded, right? A lot of people lost their jobs.
Which is also the case this time around too.
Yeah, that's true. But what the big difference here is that I think is that it's a little more long lasting because the impact it's much greater, right? Like probably 20, I don't know, there's probably a significant amount of businesses that probably won't even be in business next year, or if they even made it through this year. And then income wise, people are impacted, there'll be probably a significant amount of people that'll lose their homes I don't think the big impacts have been happening yet because we had a little bit of stimulus that helped out. If they pass another stimulus bill, that'll probably help a little bit, keep people a little more stable. But even then, most folks are like, well, what are the basics that we need to survive, right? Like, so I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but basically, there's this protecting myself and just having the basics, right? Like food, housing, and stuff, and shelter. Those are the basic things that people need to survive. And then you start to move up after that. But if they can't provide for that basic, then they're not going to be thinking about having a big wedding. And if they are getting married, then it's just going to be, I remember when I got married, for my first marriage was in 1989, and I didn't have any money. We didn't have any money. We had a simple job. Wasn't really thinking about. I didn't know anything about weddings or anything. But we just literally went to the JP, got married, had like 3 or 4 people over, small cake, a little bit of food. That was it. I mean, so if you can imagine, if people are just trying to survive, what are they thinking? And they still want to get married and be together, then they will either postpone that until they can afford to do it, or they'll just get married and just survive together without having to do any of the other stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
This is probably I think the big difference with the 2008 one, we had a pretty significant turnaround from a jobs perspective, like within a year or two. We're still at 8% now, I think, unemployment, but the long lasting impact of like service level jobs is much different than it was then. So then it was more finance jobs, things around, I mean, not that certain people weren't impacted, but it wasn't around the event industry, right? So hospitality, event industry wasn't as impacted as much. Like, for example, people still traveled for business. So hospitality wasn't impacted as much. Hotels were functioning, right? People were traveling from an airline's perspective. The airlines are way down, right? Big time. Like air travel is way down. It's finally starting to come back, but the aerospace industry has been hit significantly because there's just nobody flying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then hotel industry, think about it. I mean, I go for a walk in the area, and there's several hotels around the area where we go for a walk. And there is literally, I've seen maybe 20 or 30 cars there at the most, and even in the past month. So there's really, that business travel is not back yet, and it may not be back for a while. People are working from home, right? So you have a huge impact in a lot of different areas that you did not have in 2008. So
right.
That's a long-winded answer, but okay.
Sure. Do you think that these weddings will either not happen, or do you think that they'll move towards, 2021, 22, and maybe even down to 23?
I think people that really want to have an event, a wedding event with their family and lots of their friends, they'll move them out as far as they can. The people that just want to get married and be together and do their thing, they're just going to get married and do their thing. And they may get married now and then later, like, have a small event or something like that. Or they might just have, like, oh, let's put it off a little bit so we can get our family here. I mean, family and days are always important to people getting married, right? Especially in this generation where their friends and family is much more important than it was in like, I'm a X-gen, so wasn't as important for me as it was for other people, like it is for like my kids. Like my kids are millennials, and like they live by their friends, right? I mean, think about it. They live by their friends, they live by their family. That's what they do. I could like not talk to my family for months and be fine, so I don't know, just different generational thing probably.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like you're right. Like based on the impact of travel alone, it does sound like if it's really more about the event, that's going to have to continue to get pushed down if people aren't able to even in travel until, we know what comes next out of this.
Yeah. I mean, some states are preventing you from, you have to quarantine if you go to the state, right? Like you can't, so, like we like to go, we're in Arizona, but we like to go to New Mexico for a vacation. Well, we couldn't go this year, obviously, for obvious reasons. But even if we wanted to go, we'd have to quarantine for 14 days before we could go out and do anything. So exactly. What's the point, right?
Right.
So
Do you
Yeah.
anticipate more like, so we have seen a lot of these elopements happen in the stead of these bigger wedding events. Do you see the elopements, sticking around in the longer term, or do you think that people will kind of go back to the way that things that have been?
I think already, not necessarily elopements, but smaller events and more experience type events have already been trending. I just think this is going to accelerate that. Since I've been tracking this, guest counts went from like 160, which was back in like 07, 08 timeframe, down to 120, right? Just, in a matter of, 12 years, 13 years. And so if that's the case, and now we're really, getting to smaller and smaller events, then that's just going to accelerate the experience type events with smaller stuff. And the elopement part, the elopements have always happened. It's always been right around 2 or 3%. It's probably a little bit higher this year because of the way that people had to get married, right? Like either over video or just go down and, you'll probably see it higher, but I don't think it's going to like this. I don't think elopements by themselves is going to be this huge. I think you'll see like smaller events, but whatever you want to call it, like intimate events, like 5 or 6, 10, 20 people. Yes. That's going to accelerate.
I think that makes sense. It seems like a lot of people in the audience agree with you as well. These smaller events do seem to be the way of the future for the wedding industry. Micro events, as one person is
micro
calling
events.
them.
Yeah, whatever you want to call them. Intimate, micro, small.
Well, thank you for this little bit of a side question. We had some questions from the audience, wanted to make sure we addressed.
Awesome.
We can let you get back to state weddings, declines between 57% and 146%.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it sucks. I mean, and I think that the states where you see the biggest declines, like Nevada and some of the Northeast stuff, like the New England area, you'll see those come back, and you'll see them differently. You'll just see them differently. The places like Nevada and Hawaii, which are high travel places, those are going to take a little bit longer as depending on how people can get into those spaces. Like Hawaii, I'm not sure they're allowing too many people into their state at all right now. So it just depends. And then Nevada is a huge travel in place from all over the world, right? Like people just come to Nevada for lots of different things. And so they're hurting pretty bad. So yeah, next slide. And this is the spending impact. This is based on the Pulse survey and some of the data that we had. But you can see like some of the hardest hit areas are the darker green. So, like Minnesota, Missouri, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Kentucky. Those are the ones where people were hit hardest from financial perspective, and the businesses were hit hard by financial perspective. And then the least hit, Idaho, South Dakota, Oregon, Georgia, Hawaii, from a financial perspective. So spending declines, I see between 19 and 23%. That's kind of like, that's where you're seeing the high end of it, where the dark green is 23%. So next slide. So this was kind of like a quick chart I threw together for the New England area, which basically 53% decline in 2022 is what I was seeing. This is based on what I have now, right? So if I get data back from our survey coming out, that we do in November, and the analysis that we get from the states going into 2021, this could change, but this is what it looks like from my perspective right now. 53% decline 2020, surge of about 30% in 2021. And then I think there'll be an additional surge in 2022. Like I said, I think it's probably going to be less surge in 2021, depending on how bad the virus is going through the first part of the year. You might see that surge carry out to 2022, 2023 area. Next slide. And then spending impacts. This is the spending impact chart. I think we'll probably not get back to normal spending, which, last year was at about right at 30K. We probably won't get back there till about 2022, 2023 is what I'm estimating right now. But spending is not down. I mean, New England has always been a high spending area. People have big events. Typically they spend a lot of money. But, I think decline is probably 20% is what it says. And then a little 11% increase next year, and then 10% and so on, right? You'll just see kind of this slope up. And the big driver here is less people at the events, less importance on some of the other things, which I have some data on that I'll show you in a minute. That's really the driver for the spending thing, right? Like people are just having less people, cutting back on things that aren't important to them or aren't a priority. And that's just the bottom line. That's it. That's what it is.
Do you think that there's a chance that some people might kind of move towards like still really, really expensive weddings? So having exactly the same kind of cost, around that 35,000, but still with a smaller audience. That way they can, provide these kind of more lavish experiences for their closer family and friends.
I think you'll see that with people that are very interested in unique experienced events.
So millennials.
Yeah. I mean, if you have the money, I mean, you typically spend it, right? I mean, that's just what it boils down to. People that have money will go and spend it on whatever it is that makes them feel good for whatever they're wanting to do, right? It's not that they want it, or it's not that they need it. It's that that's what they want to do. So if they want to have a really good, cool experience event, they're going to go spend the money on it. And then, yeah, they're going to be spending 35, 40, 50K, or more, depending on what they want to do and where they're inviting people. Right. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can totally see that. It's going to be an opportunity for sure. Yeah.
Great.
But I think the key is that, planners and venues and those that kind of manage the full spectrum of the event have got to create those experiences and opportunities for yourself to be able to go and make that something that you can offer. I think you're going to have to shuffle and offer multiple things, but that's one thing in your, hey, look, here's my bag of stuff here. Look at this great event, right? That's one thing that you're going to have to, that you should offer. I think it's going to happen.
For sure.
Maybe they want to go, I don't know, a huge skiing event, right? And what's a great ski resort up there? What is the place that everybody goes to go skiing up there in New England?
There's a lot of them.
Okay. So there's one that's usually really popular.
Sunday River.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with the area, but you can imagine like someone that really wanted to have a cool ski getaway, right? With their folks, or,
exactly.
Family and stuff. And, you could see them spending $30,000 on a huge, inviting like 10 or 30 of their friends to like renting out a lodge. And then, they have the whole place to themselves and, all that kind of stuff. I think you could totally see that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that like that will become kind of a new, like at least semi-standard? So I do think we're going to continue to see some of these like micro weddings and those elopements. Do you think that this will kind of be one of those more continuous options that people will pivot to?
I think it'll be one of those things that people that have the budget and the money will, yes, probably kind of like migrate to. But, in honesty of everything, I mean, this is not the norm. Like most people don't make that much money, right?
Fair enough.
If family's contributing, and honestly, I've been doing this for a long time. A couple of years ago, I started collecting data around like what percentage of the whole wedding is the couple themselves paying for, like, are you, and I did it for each individual item. Some items are more than less, but in general, 70% of the entire event is getting funded by the couple themselves, and they're paying for it, right? So, and I think that's just in general more than it was in the past, because they want to have control over what they want to do, right? Because if the parents are paying for it, then the parents get a say in something, and then you have to bend to what they want. And you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's not what I wanted, but yeah, sure. If that's the case, then people typically spend based on what they have. So it's either savings and or disposable income is typically the things where they use the most to pay for what they do. Now they don't do this, pop this all down at one time. It's over a period of time. But if the average household income for people that are getting married is like 77,000, I don't know how many people are going to be able to afford a $30,000 or $40,000 event towards that way. I just want you to understand, yeah, there's going to be more people moving in that direction and probably wanting to do those types of things, but that's not going to be the mainstream
For sure.
wedding event.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a question. Someone's actually curious how you're projecting these numbers post 2020 on the screen here.
Using a forecast model, basically. I mean, from the number of weddings perspective, I have like 60 years worth of weddings from the States. And so we do a bunch of analysis on population. We do a bunch of analysis on business growth in the market. And then the same thing with the spending numbers. We do a bunch of analysis on income and changes in business patterns in the market and stuff like that. And that kind of all goes into how we do the forecasting. So hope that helps.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Carry on.
Someone said data magic. Yeah. So, I think the key really right now is to look at your market and to find different opportunities. And what I mean is we typically go for, like, most people will tend to gravitate towards the millennial. Like, I'm just going to use this as an example. You can extrapolate from it different things, but people typically gravitate towards the millennial consumer, right? Because that's the most people that are getting married today. When I say look at different opportunities, I'm thinking about what are the gaps in your market between you and your competitors? Like, who are they marketing to? Are they only marketing to millennials? And if they're only marketing to millennials, then what about the other people that get married? Because there are Gen Xers that get married. There are people that are in their 50s and 60s that get married. There are people that are not millennials. The Gen Zs are now starting to get into the space where they could probably start getting married. They probably don't have a lot of money, so you may not want to focus on that part of the market. But people that are like Gen X and 50 plus, they typically spend more money on things, and particularly experiences and stuff like that, because they've been around and they have money to do that. So when I say look for different opportunities, look for the gaps in your market. Everybody's tending to go towards a certain way. Well, what are the gaps? Like, another great thing to do is go out and read everybody's non-Wedding Wire and non-Knot reviews. Like, go to Google, go to Yelp, and read the reviews about the businesses so that you can understand what consumers are really thinking about things. Sometimes I think, by doing that, you're kind of getting this non-media biased look at a way a business is performing, and do some searches on them, see what they're doing, right? What are they offering? You got to find out what the gaps are in your market. If everybody's gravitating towards a certain thing, there's lots of other opportunities over here that no one's really paying attention to. And that's where I think you could think about it and shift your mindset a little bit. I went and I collected some data from couples around like what's most important to them right now. And as you can kind of see, like, this is kind of speaks to what I was talking about earlier around experience. Like, couples are kind of gravitating towards smaller events, but experience-based. So you can see like 73% of couples said that the food and the bar service was like one of the most important things for them. So what does that tell you? That they want good food. They want to all get drunk and forget about everything that's happening right now, right? And then location was 63%. That was really important to them. So if you think about those two by themselves, that really speaks to experience. And then with the photography and video part, that was really about them capturing the experience event for them. So, I mean, that's where I think the opportunities right now are, like smaller events, experience type events, food and bar service, location, photography, video. That's the core of what people are thinking about right now. You can go down further, right? You get into like, their dress and the tux and entertainment and decor, and then further down, right? And the things where I was talking about everything else is less than 20% was important to them. Those are the things where people are cutting back significantly, right? Like, they just like, that's not important. I'm not going to spend any money on that. Let's figure out how we can DIY it or do something else, right? That's where they're thinking about there. So, I mean, my point here is you got to find ways to basically, and I know this is a cliche word that everybody's using, pivot, but it's true, right? You have to figure out ways to look at your market, look at what people are thinking about, and then recalibrate what it is that you're offering so that you can capture what people care about today. So you can survive as a business, right? You have to be able to change and move and migrate and do different things. I'll give you a couple of examples. Sorry about my dog, if you can hear him. One of the things that I was reading about recently had to do with independent bookstores. And the thing is that, so most bookstores that you know basically have pretty much just like gone out of business, right? Like the only people left, I think, is Barnes and Noble. And maybe a couple of other things. But one of the things I read is that independent bookstores, basically, this is since like 2014, they were actually growing 2 to 3% per year over year. And the thing that was interesting is that what they were doing to grow their business is they were creating these events, these experiences at the location, and they were inviting their people in. So they were increasing not only, so they were having experiences at the location. So that was one example of like a dying industry, bookstores, right? Of being able to take advantage of the experience kind of movement and being able to maintain and actually grow their business a little bit. I was talking to a jewelry manufacturer on one of the interviews I was doing with businesses, and we were talking about how the jewelry manufacturer would be willing to pay money for the actual jewelry company, the business, the local business, to promote an event at their space. So they would put in funding for that. And then if they had the event at their space, they would obviously be promoting their jewelry stack, right? But they're willing to put in money to help promote the event. So creating an experience at a jewelry shop, which is probably different, right, creates a planning opportunity for planners, right, and photographers and for entertainers, right, to create and make these, even for food and bar service, to create these events at these local different things. You really have to look and see what other industries are doing within your market to move and survive. You know, like I was thinking about like, if I were a local grocery store, like non-chain wise, man, I would do whatever I could to help deliver stuff to people, right? Like when this whole thing started, I would figure out a way. Hey, look, I'd be knocking on. Hey, you need anything? What do you need? Let me deliver it to you, right? Like you got to figure out how to like get out and make things change different because the times are different. Look at what other industries are doing and take those and adapt them to your business and to your market. Some other things that I had been thinking about were like, you need to automate and innovate. Take tasks and automate them, right? Like things that you would normally, maybe it's manual. Figure out a way to automate those things, right? And innovate your business internally, like get rid of the paperwork. Figure out how to automate things so it makes it easier. Offload tasks that aren't important. I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples. Like if you have a bunch of stuff that you need to, like photography is a good one. Like I was talking to someone, I did an interview with someone who does, and I know, don't kill me photographers, but this was just something that I was thinking about. There's services out there that will do the editing for you. If you do the right setup on your camera and you give them your specifications and you work with them, they will do the editing for you and then give it back to you for literally a couple $100. So how much time can you save yourself? I know a lot of photographers like to spend a lot of time editing their photos and their videos. And I don't blame you. It's a craft. But can you offload some of those tasks? I mean, think about what people like. This is the thing that people are normally used to for photography these days, right? Everybody's doing Instagram, everybody's doing Snapchat, TikTok, whatever. That's the quality of photo and video that people care about in general. So if you can get to a spot where you can provide excellent quality video and photos by having someone else edit it for you for a lot less than it would take you to do it, that's a perfect way to offload task. Streamline your offerings. I think right now is probably the best time in history to basically go back and look at what you're offering and streamline everything, change it up, make it make it, like look at the market and figure out what people care about and then offer something different. Maybe you have the cool experience event type thing is this high level deal that you do, but there are opportunities in the lower space. So figure out what you can offer. It doesn't have to be the full thing. Like, for example, like I know a lot of people create packages, but they include all this stuff in these packages to try to get someone in to buy, right? Because they want to have all the stuff in a package. Well, I guarantee you there's probably 30 or 40% of what you're offering in your package people don't even care about. So figure out what people care about and only offer that. Like just keep cutting it back till it's a way for you to basically eliminate the waste and cut your cost. I mean, you really need to think about how much money does it cost me to deliver this thing? You really need to look at how much time, because your time is money. Every time you spend an hour on something, 15 minutes on something, that is costing you money. So figure out how much time it's costing you and cut that back. I know planners like to go above and beyond for their couples, but even if you offer full service planning, you need to limit the time that you provide that couple your time, because every hour you spend with them costs you money. Move to something like an hourly thing. Like for example, I know, I've noticed particularly in the planning space that people that are at a high level planners, they typically, are almost unreachable. But what they've done is they've actually kind of pivoted towards like offering an hourly service so that people that can't afford their full service planning can actually get access to them for a few hours. And then it helps give them direction. So as a planner, maybe you offer, an hourly thing where you say, oh, hey, buy 4 hours of my time. It's this, and that's maybe all you need to get started, right? I don't know. There's lots of different things you can do. You just got to think outside the box. I think I'm done talking. So what questions you got?
That's great. Yeah, I think let's go ahead and move into the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions that we haven't addressed yet, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Someone is actually curious if you think that there might be longer term impacts to this. So do you think that the wedding industry will be changed kind of forever, or in, 30, 40 years down the line? What kind of changes do you think this might have?
That's interesting. I don't know yet the long-term impact. I don't think anybody, the problem is like from an economics perspective, there's nothing really to relate this incident back to. The closest thing you could probably relate it to would be like the flu issue back in 1918. But business was so different back then, it really doesn't relate to today. And interestingly, like, the stock market continues to rise and continues to grow. But I think that is really kind of like this out of balance reality from what's really happening on the ground, right? Like what people are going through day to day. So I think, I personally think it's at least going to have a 3 to 5 year impact overall. But it could be longer. Honestly, if you think about it, it took us we had probably the largest period of growth in history for the US, which was a 10-year period before we had another like recession event. And it took us, like if you could, Edwin, go back to the slide with the spending numbers for the US. I think someone had a question about that, like what happened in 2016. But if you could go back to that slide. Yeah, right here. No, that one. So if you look at what happened in 2008, right? Like in 2007, in 2008, I kind of changed the way I was collecting the specific categories of items. But in 2007, the spending was right around 28K. And so it dropped from 28K to 24K. And then into 29, you can see 2009, it went to 22K. And then there was a surge, and then it literally, the economy just kind of fizzled a little bit and was dropping down. So people were being, like this whole growth period, even though we had like lower jobs and stuff like that, if you guys have been paying attention, you would have noticed that your utility bills went up, rents have gone up, other things like, even though food was not necessarily, it pretty much stayed pretty stable, the other things that you spend money on actually went up. Healthcare went up, all those things, right? So all of those things put pressure on people spending money, because at the end of the day for weddings, outside of other people contributing, it all comes down to savings and disposable income. 70% of couples use savings and disposable income to pay for their wedding. And so if that's what they're using, where's that? How do you do it? There's this whole thing called lifestyle creep. People wanting a bigger house, auto loans are the highest they've ever been in the history of our country, right? Like home prices have gone way up. So now your mortgage is ridiculous. It's just all these things are compounded on each other that are putting pressure on your ability to buy new things. So I think as you see those things happening, the pressure is going to be even more as you go forward, right?
Mm-hmm. Actually, a really interesting question from someone. When you say disposable income, are you including credit cards or things like that in this source of money, or is this truly, from income?
Yeah, so people do use credit. About 30% of people use some level of credit in when they're paying for stuff. So either it's a loan, it's existing credit, or new credit. But it's only about 30% of people that use credit or other funding to help pay for their wedding. It's literally 70% of it is disposable income and savings.
Great.
So yeah, I think credit card debt went down, but it probably went up to the highest it's ever been recently, right? Like people are just using their credit to survive in some cases. And then, so think about what's happening today, right? So you got a lot of other pressures. Student loan debt is the highest it's ever been in our country.
Tell me about
Auto loan debt is the highest it's ever been. I don't know. Has anybody gone out and priced out a new vehicle lately? Like these trucks and some of these vehicles are like $50,000 and $60,000. I'm like, think about it. Even if you put 10K down on that, what's your payment going to be? Like, $800 a month, right? Even if it like maybe 1% interest, it's $800 a month. So
what do you think the impact will be for new vendors coming into the industry? So I imagine that there's definitely going to be people who've lost their jobs in this,
yes,
very different time, who might decide that they want to pivot into something like wedding photography or something like that. What do you think the experience will be like for them?
So I think it'll be pretty easy for them, honestly. So anything that is a low barrier to entry, like photography, DJ, planning, those are low barrier to entries. Like it doesn't cost you that much to get started. It'll be really easy for them to set up shop and start taking business. Now, what do they offer? What do they do? Might be completely different, but it's going to be really easy for them to set up shop and start taking business. In fact, if you're already booked all of next year and even into the following year, right, then next year and the year after will probably be the biggest year of competitive. You'll have new competitors surging into the photography, the low barrier to entry stuff. I think most of you've already noticed over the past 3 or 4 years, venues have been like popping up everywhere, right? Like everyone's like, oh, now we have this space. Let's go offer, let's start a wedding venue over here, right?
I have a barn.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. So that's been happening, right? But those are higher barrier to entry type scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that, so there will be some of that because next year, most people, a lot of the popular events are going to be booked, right? And then some of the places, into 2022 will probably be booked, some of the more popular places. So there is opportunity in the venue space to basically catch that surge over the next year or two. But the big problem is going to be like competitors coming into the space for the low barrier to entry stuff for people that lost their jobs. And they're going to go, hey, I'm going to be a planner now, or I'm going to be a photographer, or I'm going to be a DJ. And they're going to take business from people, and it's not going to be great. And some will be great, some won't. And it's going to be like it normally is, right? Like, the smart ones will come in, learn. And then the next thing you know, they're going to get a couple of years of experience under their belt, and then they're going to start popping up into the higher end space. And so you're going to see that competition probably coming in 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Great. Thank you so much, Shane. Everyone in the audience, please do keep an eye out for a follow-up email, which will include a link to this recording with the slide deck. If you do have further questions or comments, please absolutely feel free to reach out to us and contact us. And on behalf of everyone at zenweds, thank you so much for joining our presentation today. Thank you so much to Shane.
Thanks,
and we hope you guys enjoyed this and hope to see you guys again soon.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.